Hello, I'm Buddy Goodboy. You're here watching, what's the name of this show again? Saved by the Londo Bell, where I build and detail Gundam model kits that I have been trying to clear out of my backlog for some time. What we are working on today is the high-grade Universal Century New Gundam Heavy Weapons type. This is the kit that we actually finished building last week. At this point, there's a couple little detail points that we're going to put in here and make sure that it looks its best. So let me show you what we're working with today here. There were a couple of places that still need sanding and fixing up, so we're going to sand those down with some regular sanding sticks and a couple of glass files that'll give it a really nice, even shine. Other than that, we're basically going to be painting, so I've got a couple of fluorescent paints that I'm going to use, which, we'll see if this shows up on camera here or not. Hopefully it will. But, some pretty phosphorescent right there when you shine a UV light onto them. So it's possible that this is blowing out the camera lens, but it'll look great in still photos that I post later. I've got a couple of flat colors that we're going to use for detailing work as well. So red, black, and yellow, some pretty basic colors we're going to work into there. And there's also, this is a new one for me. This is Molotov Liquid Chrome. So this is a paint marker here. So what I'm going to be doing is letting the marker kind of drain out into one of these little trays here and then painting it on with a tiny brush. So let me show you what that looks like. I actually haven't used it before today, so I wanted to sort of get the feel for how it works. See that very shiny bit right in the middle there? Let's see if we get the focus to adjust here. There we go. Okay, that shiny part in the middle, that is Molotov Liquid Chrome. So that's going to be what I use to detail paint on top of the gunmetal gray that the kit came in. Other than that, last thing that I want to show off here, this is a tool that I came to late in the game but has become really useful, a wet palette. So this is just a piece of Tupperware or whatever brand you like. It has a bunch of napkins on the inside of it and a piece of unwaxed parchment paper on top of that. Just put a whole bunch of water in there, let it soak all the way through, drain out the excess water, and what you have is a damp surface that'll keep your paints wet for, I don't know, days if you keep the lid on it properly. So with acrylic paints like we're going to be using, that makes a big difference, especially if you're mixing colors. So you want to make sure that if you have a whole bunch of color that you're going to mix and you want it to get exactly right and keep the whole kit in that color, you mix it up in the wet palette, keep it in there, put the Tupperware's lid on it, put it in the refrigerator for a couple of days, and you can come back to it at your convenience. So very, very useful tool here. And not my idea, but this actually, the particular way of doing this, the cheapest possible way, Tupperware, napkins, parchment paper. I actually got that from modelmaking.guru on YouTube. It was absolutely great. Gunpla builder, painter, weatherer. Yeah, I learned everything I know about hand painting a Gundam from watching some of his videos over and over. So, at this point, take a look at, this is the kit that we built last week, finished last week rather. So the High New Gundam Heavy Weapons type. As you can see, once the camera focus readjusts, there's actually a lot of surface detail on here, but it's not necessarily popping out because it's all of the same color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and paint some of these different colors here. Going to make sure that the recessed areas have a little bit of shadow in them, that sort of thing. So I'm going to start with the head here, just because, well, why not? It's also visually impressive. There we go. Okay, so if you take a look at the head close up here, come on, I know you can do this. There we go. There's a lot of detail on that face. So there are vents around the face, and there are little cannons in the forehead, as well as a big camera in the forehead. And the eyes on there are all molded in white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with a small brush, and we're going to detail those. So the paint that I'm going to use on the eyes first is going to be this fluorescent yellow. And I'm going to go around those with a little bit of black. So once that's dry, I will finish up the detail in black here. So first things first, I actually got to disassemble the head. In this particular case, they made disassembling the head pretty simple, as long as you're not me on camera trying to do it. That's always the catch. Hello everybody in the chat. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Come on. Man, this is a lot harder than it was when I was trying to pull it off earlier. Ah, I broke a nail. Good God. Okay, so then we got the face part that we're painting here. Just going to shake up this fluorescent yellow. Drop a little bead of that into our wet palette. So I'm not going to need a whole ton of this at first. There's a couple of little places around the kit that I'm going to put this, but doesn't need to be anything major. So, got a little stir right here. I'm just going to mix this up a little bit to make sure that the paint is consistent and even throughout. And the paint, or the water that's leaking up through the bottom of the wet palette should actually be enough to thin this down to a good consistency. So, wet down my tiny brush over here. Sure it gets to a good point. Load the brush with some of our fluorescent yellow. And this is likely going to take more than one coat to get this the brightness that we want. But that's okay. Thin layers wind up working a lot better than thick layers. That way the detail on the kit shows through, and you're not having to worry about the thickness of the paint obscuring the detail. And in this particular area right here, I'm not going to be too terribly careful. I'm just going to glop it on, making sure it doesn't stray too far out of the area I want. Because it's, I'm going to wind up fine detailing in black over this, so I'll have time to fix it up. Not sure if you can see that right there, just because the colors are so similar. But in person, it looks a lot more distinct. I'm having trouble balancing the light and the focus here, but you're gonna have to take my word for it. It actually looks okay. So we've got another camera on the back of the head here. To do the same thing, just load up the brush with a little bit of that fluorescent yellow paint. And making sure that I'm hitting the area that I want to on the back here. And not going too far out of it. I think what I'm going to wind up doing is just tap the brush on the surface and let the capillary action of the paint do its work. So basically the water in the paint will let itself spread out until it hits resistance, so a wall. So if you got a recessed area like that, where you don't want to, like, you know, swab your brush up and down like that and, you know, get a mess everywhere, a lot of times using the capillary action of the water itself, that's going to wind up being a good help. Alright, we've got a couple of areas on here that I want to paint up in our chrome silver. So the machine gun's on the top of the head. and the little vents next to the face. So these little cheek vents just on the side of the helmet here. Let me adjust the focus here. If I can keep the focus of the camera fixed, then I'll be able to use the video here as reference. So I'm not going to be looking directly at the kit. I'm just going to be looking at the video of it. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me point out with my paintbrush here because it's easier to point that with that. What I'm going to do is paint these machine guns on the forehead and these little cheek vents right here. I'm going to try and do it without losing focus too much and without straying too far outside the lines, because I'm going to be watching this on camera instead of looking at it, you know, with my own two eyes. So I've got my little paint cup right here, got my Molotow chrome paint marker, and I'm just going to give a little bit of pump action there, and as I'm doing that, that is leaking paint out into the cup here, so that is usable with usable with a brush now. Cap that back up, because these markers aren't the cheapest ever, so I want to make sure I get my money's worth out of it. Okay. And the reason I'm not doing this in the wet palette is because metallic paints have little metallic flakes in them, and that does not work well with a whole bunch of water. So that will spread out and get into everything else, and it will also dilute the metallic flakes in there. So I'm not going to do this with a whole lot of water. Hi, Wolf Teller. Yes, this is the new heavy weapon system, and I gotta say, it's looking pretty good so far. This is going on a little bit thicker than I meant to at first, but it's a small detail, so it should be okay. And let's get a little bit of the inside on there. And make sure you get all sides of this little cheek vent covered. Yeah, Wolf, Wolf Teller, this version of the kit does come with all of the standard weapons that come with the new Gundam, as well as everything that's supposed to come with the heavy weapons system. So that's why I picked this version of the kit, just because it got so many options as opposed to the regular new Gundam high grade. You don't have patience for true modeling work. What I'm doing is not, you know, not true modeling work either. I'm just doing what I can do in an hour on a stream. That seems to work for me just fine. Let me see what else. There was something under here I was going to paint. Nope, I guess it must have been on the other part of the head. Okay, well that is going to be it for this part of the head. Oh no, wait, I've got the forehead camera left to do. So clean my brush off, load it back up with a little bit of fluorescent yellow, And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the back camera here. I'm just going to tap it gently and let the capillary action of the water fill the area. I think the brightness of the camera may be a little too much for the fluorescent yellow on here, but you can see it in person. And let me try the UV light again, see if that blows it out or anything. Yeah, see that glow? That's how you know it's there, baby. Alright, so I'm just going to set that aside, let that dry here. What else? I do have a list of everything that's that I was trying to cover on here. So, I was missing a part, and I still haven't found it. So I'm going to try and disguise it. So, this little crown part right here is supposed to have a black centerpiece on it. And it's very tiny, and I lost it. So, we're going to fix that in the easiest way possible by just pretending it didn't happen and covering the area with a little bit of paint to disguise it. Since this is going to be sitting on my shelf, and the closest anybody's going to get to it is like 2-3 feet away, it's not going to make a difference. Nobody will notice or care. And that's the important thing to remember about this, is that this is supposed to be for fun. You know, it's not, if you're going into it with the attitude that everything needs to be perfect or you got to impress somebody, you're just not going to have fun. So there's no real point in that. I'm just trying to do better than the kits that I built when I was in high school. So, let's see. Got a little bit outside the line there, but not too bad. Hey, Boozy. Hey, Boozy fans. How you doing today? Eggplants, eggplants, eggplants. Oh, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. Okay, there are a little bit of grooves on the front here that the paint is running into, as you can see on the left side here. I guess camera left, head right. I'm just gonna... I'll let that happen. I'll go back and fix it up a little bit. Hello, hello. Yes, we are working on Gunpla today. This is the new Gundam heavy weapon system for everybody who's just joining us. This is what the kit looks like up close. This is what the kit looks like far away. So what I am doing is going in and doing detail work. Since these are relatively cheap kits, they sometimes don't come in all the detail they should. So what I'm doing is going in and painting all the little details that are molded into the surface that don't necessarily come in the right color. So I've got some chrome that I'm working with, I've got some fluorescent for these sensors, and I've got some flat colors that I'm working with for sections like this right here that I just painted black. So that's it for the headpiece here. At least everything I had planned anyway. If I think of anything else, obviously I'm going to come back to it, but I've got a list of other things I want to accomplish here, so let's get moving with it. So I'm going to take the chest piece off here. I'm going to take the missile launchers off. Let's see if I can actually do that. There we go. Getting stuck in here. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a vent on the back of the missile launchers here. That is going to be painted up in chrome. And these missiles up front, I'm going to paint these in red. The little spaces between them I'm going to go back in later once the missiles are painted and the paint is dried on that. And use capillary action with a little bit of light black paint and just let that spread itself through the rest of the cracks in there. So let's get started with some of the Molotov Chrome. So for those of you who just came in, that is this paint right here, which is the same color as my paint tin. This is actually an acrylic paint that came in a marker here. It's very, very metal colored, and it's brand new to me and is quickly becoming one of my very favorite toys. So, what we're going to do here is just go around the outside here. Wow, that dried fast. Never mind, I'm going to get some fresh paint here. So give the marker a good shake, pop the lid off, and start putting some paint into the tray here. So hopefully you can see some of that liquid in there. That is going to be the paint that we're working with, and it looks so good. Ah, I do love it so. Well worth the 12 bucks I paid for the marker, which is probably overpaying, but whatever. It's a toy. You can't put a price on the joy of a child's laughter. Okay, so now we got the brush loaded up properly with paint here. Let's go around the outside of this carefully. We're trying to stay within the lines that are set by the machine itself. But knowing that, you can always go back later and fix it. If I need to go back and put some more paint on later, obviously I can do that. So I'm erring on the side of minimalism, but I think it's going to work out okay. Alright, it's a little bit spotty, but it'll dry nicely. We'll be able to pull some of the detail back out. So I'm going to go back over to the other one here, do the same thing. And what I've learned is that this dries off very quickly on the brush, so don't have a whole ton of time to work with it. Nope. I guess I'm not using it exactly as it's designed, so that's okay. I'm learning a new tool here. Okay, This one got a little bit sloppy, but not too terribly bad. I can always go in with a small razor blade or something, take any excess pieces of paint off, and just go over the edges again, just make sure that they're smooth. Alright, so that's that taken care of. And it's looking pretty nice, if I do say so myself, and I guess I am. Hope that's not egotistical or anything, but I do want this to look nice. That's why I'm putting all the effort into it. Yeah, Drake, this chrome is pretty stunning. It's Molotov chrome. Let me show you that right quick. Molotov. Highly recommended. Okay, so I'm going to go in with a flat red right here. And what I've done with all of my paint containers, because they come in so many different color gradations, it's hard to remember what's what. I always put a little bead of paint on the cap and just make sure that the same cap stays with the same bottle, so you can always tell at a glance what color it's going to look like when it dries. There's always slight differences as far as how it looks like when it's wet versus when it's dry. So just put a little bead of that into our wet palette here. Look at that. It's a little air bubble in there. So little air bubbles like that are why I always try to stir these, and it helps mix in with a little water in these wet palette here. It gives you a nice little consistency for your paint. Oop. Problem with a wet palette sometimes is when it gets too wet and runs through, sometimes you get runny paint like that. So I'm going to try and hold this still as much as I can. And this is pretty delicate work, if only because it's so small, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Because it is so small that if there are any imperfections or inconsistencies here, you might be the only one to notice them. And yeah, there's a little bit of red that's leaking out into the space between these missile pods. That's fine. What I don't want to do is get it too much on the white plastic surrounding it, just because getting that off is annoying. It's not terrible, it takes a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, but if I can keep it clean, I'd like to. Alright, if you can take a look here, some of the paint around the edges is pretty thin, so it's starting to dry already. The good thing about acrylic paints is also one of the bad things about acrylic paints. They do dry quickly, especially the metallic color that I was just painting with dried almost as fast as I put it on. But that also works in your favor, because if you're trying to dry something quicker, what you can do is use a hair dryer, and that actually works pretty perfectly. Okay, so while the paint is still wet, since I messed this up, this is an educational moment. I'm just going to twist my little napkin here, as small as I can make it, and just dab at that paint and take it off. So since it's still wet, shouldn't be a problem. A little bit of red stain over there, so I'm just going to scrape it out with my thumbnail a little bit. And there we go. Clean. So Rabbit Hyena Rider, what I'm using as a wet palette cost me like $1. It's a Tupperware container. There are napkins inside of it. Those are wet. On top of that, I have a sheet of parchment paper, which I bought an entire roll of for a few dollars. So that was in the kitchen section of my Walmart. So you want to make sure and get unwaxed parchment paper for your kitchen. What you want to do with this is you want to make sure to get both sides of the parchment paper wet and keep the napkins wet, and that will leach just enough of water through that wax paper, or through that parchment paper, to keep your paints wet and keep them going for a couple of days, actually. So I really like this. This is my, I don't know, it's a great useful tool. And Wolf Teller, what I'm using for reference at this point, most of the colors are pretty close to where they need to be. Some of these I'm just picking out, ones that I want to see more detail on, like the vents on the cheeks and the face. I just thought they looked cool and could use a little bit more detail to help them stand out. So a little bit of color contrast. So I painted those up in chrome. I'll show you in just a minute here. And these missiles, according to the box art, are supposed to be white. But that's less fun. I like red missiles. Just because they stand out, like, it signifies danger. Oop. This is going to look a little bit sloppy at first, but when you come in for a second round of detail painting, that's when you really get the cleanup. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of black paint, like I said before, and just let capillary action fill in between these missiles. So that should cover any excess paint. Yeah, so that should handle that. The chrome paint on the back is actually dry to the touch now. I can tell because I accidentally brushed up against it with my fingers a second ago. But, yeah, so the detail is still there. The paint's a little bit splotchy. So I'm going to see if I can't do anything to fix that up. Probably going to be next time. I want to see if I can get as much done as possible on here. So I'll allow that for the cleanup stage. But, so that's the head done. That's the missile pods on the shoulders done. And I hadn't quite decided what colors I want some of the details on this chest armor to be. These vents on the underside here, they would look good in either yellow or red. I'm leaning towards red, if only because I've already got the paintbrush out. Okay, so I think I mentioned earlier, sometimes you get a mess in your wet palette, so I'm just going to soak up all of that stray black paint here. Ta-da! I've now made a mess. And try to tamp down some of this paper again here. So give your red acrylic a shake here. I'm using model color because that's what was available at my local model store. You can really use anything. I mean, you can use $1 apple barrel paints from Walmart. It doesn't matter. Some of them will have like finer grain pigments in there, so they'll go on a little bit easier, they'll dry a little bit smoother and a little bit thinner. But if you're just getting started in this, you don't have to expend a whole lot of money on it. Just do what works at first. Okay, so we got the paint loaded back up on the brush. Wipe off a little bit of the excess. I think what I'll do is take the red all the way out to the hard edges here. And then maybe in the second round of detail painting, I'll go in and paint black on the recessed part of the vent. So that way we get a nice little bit of color contrast in there. Oops. Okay, got a little sloppy with this one. That's fine. What I'll do, if I can't just, yeah, you know, let's try something here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move just over the surface of this part right here. I'm going to try not to go into the recess at all. Just gently brush horizontally across the surface and see if I can't get some of that cleaned up. Okay. Took a little bit off, more than I meant to, but that's perfectly fine. You can always add more on. So I'm just going to go back in and fix the little bit of a mess that I made here, but otherwise I've largely got this where I want it to be. And this isn't canon either, but I'm just going to put a little bit of yellow onto the chest armor here. So that is Game Color, also by Vallejo. Model Color, Game Color, Vallejo. All of these are by Acrylicos Vallejos, who are just great as far as building, or miniature and model building paints. Well worth the $3 a tube. Okay, so those areas that stick out here, those sort of chevrons, I guess. Truncated triangles. Try to get around the edges without going too far overboard. This is an area where less is certainly more. So if you're doing this and you think that, you know, there's no way I can get this detail painted on here without just messing it up, I mean, go for it. But ultimately, it's not going to make a huge difference either way. So if this isn't perfect, then whatever. I may go back in with a razor blade and kind of scrape away a little bit of the excess paint that ran overboard a little bit. But otherwise, from a distance on the shelf, this is going to look pretty good. Alright, let's see. On the torso proper, there's not really anything else that I want to do. There is a small camera right here that I'm probably going to have to paint some white down first, because trying to paint anything on top of black, even a fluorescent color, is not going to work terribly great. And I had not thought of that before I started, so my white is actually somewhere in here. So I'm going to go with what I have immediately on hand. I'm not going to go digging out through stuff. So this is enamel paint. It's slightly different from what we're using. Everywhere else in the kit is so far has been acrylic paint. Now enamel is made out of a different solvent, and otherwise it's usually like the same pigment in there, titanium white. But it doesn't take the same thinner. You can't thin this down with water. You either have to use alcohol or something else. But since I only need a very little bit of it, I'm just going to use it unthinned. Shake that up a little bit. Oh, you do 40k. Nice, Rabbit. 40k is one of those things that I always thought would be cool to get into, but I am so far out of my depth with that. I looked at the Wikipedia for that, and there is so much going on. You should also note that if you're painting with enamel paints, these aren't amazingly non-toxic, so just be careful with them. And the thing about white paints also is that they take multiple layers to look any good. So I'm going to let that dry and move on to other pieces of the mobile suit. Whew. That does not smell nice. Pop a cap back on you. Alright. What else we got? I'm going to take off one of the arms here and we'll get started on that. So inside the shoulders here, you see how we have these yellow parts. Now, if I remember correctly... Actually, I'm going to check my reference material for this. My reference material being the cut-down box. When I have like a whole bunch of boxes like this, I wind up cutting them down once I've finished building the kit, so it's just large enough to contain the kit and all of its accessories. That saves me a lot of storage space. But considering it doesn't have a picture of the shoulders on what I have, I'm going to do what makes me happy. And I'm going to paint the inside of these thrusters red. So I'm going to keep the outside yellow. I'm just going to dip in there with some red. I'm just going to dab gently at it because I don't need to slather it around too much. I'll just let the capillary action of the paint do the work. This is a little bit of, I did go out of the lines a little bit. Not terribly much, so that I can fix with a razor blade later. Okay, just dabbing gently. You don't need all that much paint. And since I don't have a smaller brush, I'm trying to be as careful as I can. And I'm going to wind up having to fix that up a little bit later. Go back in and sharpen some of the edges, fill in a little bit, probably another layer of red on the paint. And if you take a look up close here, we have right there is a nub that I left on. I forgot to sand off. So this is what's left over from cutting it off of the runners. So since we're here, I'm just going to go ahead and knock that out real quick. Where did all of my sanding stuff go? Don't even need to bear down all that hard. It will largely care for itself. There we go. Alright, so there's that down here. Now this isn't going to show because it's underneath the shoulder armor, but I like the idea of the center of this this joint here, the recessed circle here. I like the idea of that being chrome, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that, as well as the inside of the elbow joints right here. So, I can find what I did with my chrome. Here we go. Just need a little bit of liquid on there at a time because it dries so fast. You can only do a little bit at a time, but go ahead and load up my brush again. And get in there with the shiny, shiny chrome. You know what? I think this might not work with water. I should have looked up what type of material Molotov chrome is. Certain types of paints don't work well with water, and if there's any residual water left in your brush, like there was in mine, it will just not work well for you. this is really not making it easy for me. I'm not sure what specifically is going on with the solvent this pigment is in here and all the metallic flakes are in, but it's wanting to dry super quickly, so I'm just going to have to get more than I usually like on the brush and then work with that. Alright, there we go. That's a nice little chrome piece. Rabbit, my favorite Gundam series, well, my first one was Gundam Wing, so I've always got a little soft spot for that. My favorite mobile suit for a long time was the Zeta Gundam, because I had the old high-grade version of that came out around the early 2000s. And that was one of the first Universal Century series mobile suits I got. And I just finished watching that, actually. So I finally saw the series in completion this year and loved it. I really like Turn A Gundam, and Gundam 00 is just fantastic. I love that show. I mean, people have mixed feelings about the movie, but they're allowed. It was cool. Alright, so Chrome, probably going to need some fixing up, but that's fine. The thing about this hobby is you can always fix it. I kind of love that. I also kind of hate it because it's hard to know when to jump off. Yeah, Gundam Wing was the first series to come out in the US, so that was a lot of people's firsts. Then Cartoon Network didn't complete showing the original Mobile Suit Gundam because it's a war story, and 9/11 happened right before the climax of the series was going to air, and it kind of shows a lot of, heavy stuff. So the TV series never actually ended on there. So the Gundam Seed wound up being a lot of people's next series, because that was what was on Cartoon Network next. Or, I'm sorry, G Gundam between those two, but Gundam Seed wound up being a big one for a lot of people. It's not my favorite. I like some of the mobile suit designs, but I think the plot is not the most thought out. Ah, crap. I just put my finger right in this. That's what you gotta watch out for. You wanna get your fingerprints in drying paint. There are these little recessed areas here. I'm going to go ahead and just brush gently across the surface of that. I just want to get the edges in chrome, because I'm going to go in later and fill in the recessed areas in black. I'll probably touch up the chrome again later after I do that, but if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget. There we go. Gently scratching away at a little bit of stray paint. Let me get up close and show you here. What I'm going to do is just run the end of the razor blade very gently, horizontally over the surface of this. Not digging in or anything, just scraping off light little bit of paint that was drying on the surface. Yeah, Rabbit, if you're thinking about getting a kit, you can do a lot worse than a gun tank. They are easy builds, but they look really good in my opinion once you have them done. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can get that to balance there. Part of the trick is making sure that these dry okay without, you know, touching too much other stuff. Alright, let's see. Let's check in, given that we're running at about an hour here. Let's check back in with some of the other stuff we were looking at earlier and see how that's doing now that they're drying. So we've got the crown of the head here. So I like the way the machine guns came out. I like the cheek vents. Can't really tell the fluorescent yellow. So I'm not sure how well that's going to read at a distance. Definitely pops more in the back here. But let's try it. Let's get a good look under UV and see what happens. Yeah, there we go. That's the stuff. Alright, let's take a look at the face right here. I'm gonna have to go in and fill in the vents on the face, but that is something I can put off a little bit. Eventually, I'm gonna have to do the black around the green eyes, but that looks cool as hell. Oh, I like that a lot. And let's get in there real quick. This is going to take a little bit of cleanup here, but I think this is coming out okay. I may even disguise the fact that I'm missing a piece. So if it does, great. If it doesn't, then I tried. These are starting to dry here. So I'm going to need to go in and fix some of the details around the edges of these missiles, but this is largely how I want them to look. I'm going to fill in the recesses between them later. Maybe go in with another pass of chrome on the back of these, just to kind of even it out a little bit. Let's see, is this still wet over here? Yeah, this is still drying here, but I like the way these are coming out. I think this is going to be a great little bunch of added detail on here. Rabbit, thank you for following. I appreciate it. I do this just about every Wednesday, so you can feel free to drop by anytime. Looking forward to meeting you and getting to know you better. Alright, well that is my hour here, so I'm going to call it for the night, but thank you so much for joining me. This has been just an absolute blast for me, because I'm getting to do stuff that I haven't done in a long time with my Gunpla, and like actually make them look complete, look finished. It's going to be great. There we go. So yeah, I'm Buddy Goodboy. I'm on Twitter, as you can see from the stream overlay here. Check me out anytime. Come say hi. I love to talk to people. I love getting to know people and talk about my hobbies. Show me your stuff. I'd love to see what you're up to. Other than that, I think I'm going to call that a night. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back here next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Bye.